I'm excited to get started on this discussion about stormwater, and excited to hear from our various speakers today. So I wanted to introduce, and I'm going to leave it to Brooke to do the introductions, but I just wanted to thank, first of all, Capitol Hill EcoDistrict, who is our community partner in sharing the mission of sustainable, healthy communities at district scale. I also want to thank the Seattle Department of Transportation and Seattle Public Utilities for supporting this, and the Rainwise Program, which is a collaboration between King County and City of Seattle. Today's speakers are from King County, and we're really excited to have them. And also I wanted to thank Weber Thompson, who's a longtime member of the Seattle 2030 district, for also being present and presenting today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our host for today, Brooke Bradford, who's the Community Development Associate with the Capitol Hill EcoDistrict. Brooke joined the Capitol Hill EcoDistrict in 2021. And Brooke is a Seattle Central District native whose interest in land use and urban planning was sparked by living in the heart of a major city. And she graduated from Chapman University with a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Science and Policy, and is currently pursuing a master's degree in infrastructure planning and management at the University of Washington. And with that, Brooke, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to introduce the rest of our team, starting with Ellen Southard, the founder of Side Story, a firm dedicated to supporting community enriching projects that emphasize climate resiliency through a human-centered approach to stakeholder engagement and placemaking. Then we have Rachael Meyer. Rachael has led Weber Thompson's landscape architecture studio since 2015, with the focus on integrating landscape and with urban development. Then we have Joe Sullivan with the King County Wastewater Treatment Division. She does Rainwise outreach and is involved in a variety of green stormwater infrastructure educational and collaborative efforts. Then we have Sonia Sievesind, the owner of Roots and Rivers Consulting, and is the lead for all Rainwise big roof properties. Then we'll go into a land acknowledgement. We recognize that we are on the lands of the Coast Salish peoples, whose ancestors resided here since time immemorial. Many indigenous peoples thrive in this place. With gratitude, we honor the land, the water, and its peoples. And thank you to our sponsor, Seattle Department of Transportation and the Bullitt Foundation, for making this project possible today. We appreciate your continued support for our public life. A little bit of Zoom protocol. This content will be recorded and posted to our website for folks that were unable to attend today. We ask that if you have questions during the event, you put them in the general chat box or message me directly with your questions, and they will be answered during our Q&A period. The photo in the bottom of the slide has directions on how to start live transcripts for this presentation. And during this workshop, you will have the opportunity to participate in polls that will pop up on the left side of your screen. Participation is anonymous and optional. A program overview. First, we will set the stage for our neighborhoods. Then we are going to go into a little Stormwater 101 to talk about why we're here and the problem. Then we will talk about green stormwater infrastructure, some of the nature-based solutions that can help solve the problem, then cover a few incentives and resources for property owners to put in GSI. Then Rainwise will go into depth about their program, which offers incentives for landowners to put GSI cisterns and rain gardens on their properties, and include some case studies. Then we will discuss the Waterworks grant program that can provide substantial funding for projects that kept our water clean, and provide several GSI case studies that they have founded. We will also look into other resources, including the Stormwater Facility Credit. At the end, we will take a look at some considerations about installing GSI and who you might involve in your team, on your team, to move forward with the project, from an idea to an actual functioning installation. Then very last, we will give you the opportunity to test your property and then come back to our Q&A with any site-specific questions that you may have. and I will lead us into a discussion about our neighborhood. As mentioned, I am with the Capitol Hill EcoDistrict, and the EcoDistrict is a community-driven effort that promotes environmental resilience, socially equitable and culturally vibrant neighborhoods in Seattle's city center. We often describe ourselves as a small but mighty team because we're a team of 4, but we put on some incredibly big projects. We focus on making this densely populated neighborhood livable and sustainable for all people by piloting new and innovative ideas at the neighborhood level that can be scaled throughout the city or region. We center ourselves around community initiatives. The EcoDistrict defines our community as if you are affected by the choices made about your public spaces in Capitol Hill, then you are a member of our community. You're all members of the EcoDistrict community, and we thank you for being here with us today. Specific to GSI and Capitol Hill, our projects are currently centering studies that measure the quality of our spaces, how people interact with our spaces, and centering those experiences around community resiliency. Capitol Hill is home to more than 37,000 people and makes up about 5% of the city of Seattle's population. This number increases daily. And as our city is growing, our built environment is hardening. We have launched our Gsi Pilot Projects that have been especially important to us as we are recognizing that our neighborhood is changing and it is incredibly necessary to find ways to preserve our waterways. So a bit about our pilot projects. The EcoDistrict began to launch our first pilot projects in 2021, 2 of which are specifically geared towards GSI and the environment. Our GSI projects has consisted of walking tours of Capitol Hill, which have highlighted existing GSI structures, as well as places where GSI could be improved. As a second component to this project, we have commissioned 2 artists to design 4 rain-activated murals on 4 streets in Capitol Hill. These murals are especially unique in that they represent a water story or water travel throughout our neighborhood. And the paint only shows when it comes into contact with rainwater. So when it rains, these murals will light up and be gorgeous on our streets, which will give us a really great opportunity to enjoy the rain that we have a lot of in Seattle. The final aspect to our GSI pilot project, you guys are actually all participating in. It is a workshop aimed to promote GSI opportunities with the hopes that we can support locals in finding opportunities to incorporate GSI in their future projects. Our Capitol Hill Connections project is an environmentally focused one, which will build a biodiversity corridor along 11th Street. This project will create gardens that support biodiversity, such as birds and pollinators. It will reduce heat islands through tree canopy and other vegetation and contribute to our food supply, and as well as help manage stormwater. The program facilitates community engagement and teaches our neighbors about incentive programs for adding corridor locations near their homes. It will offer opportunities for both homeowners, renters, and visitors to engage in enhancing gardens in our neighborhoods. As a part of our project process, it has been incredibly important that we partner with agencies that specialize in these subjects. The EcoDistrict has collaborated with Seattle 2030 District and Rainwise to craft the educational content and to promote GSI activation around the city, with the hopes that we can disperse enough information to get public engagement and to make a difference in our communities. I will pass this over to Ellen to talk about the Seattle 2030 District.
Hi, thanks again, Brooke, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I'm Ellen Southard. I'm the Stormwater Program Manager with the Seattle 2030 District. We are a membership organization of landowners, developers, property management specialists, policymakers, and land use professionals who have committed to improving the built environment. As the 2030 District, we help solve problems through collective action at a district scale. We're part of a national network of 20 city districts across the US that has set high performance targets for mitigating climate change by the year 2030. In a few minutes, I'll get into some details about the work that we're doing at the Seattle 2030 district. But in the meantime, I'm going to set some context for the challenges of stormwater here in Puget Sound. Puget Sound is the second largest estuary in the US, and it is a very delicate ecosystem fed by 173 creeks, streams, and rivers that all feed into the sound. Our annual pollution rate is equal to that of the Exxon Valdez spill, which was the second largest crude oil spill in US history. And every year, those creeks and streams, after stormwater events, the stormwater flushes pollutants into those water bodies that then feed into the sound, and we have this collective pollution issue. It's also very dangerous from the standpoint of ocean acidification. Because the Puget Sound is a colder body of water, ocean acidification is escalated through this pollution. And we have a strong cultural identity here in terms of the Coast Salish people. The Coast Salish people have been here for hundreds of years. They depend on clean water for their historical practices and their main economy, which is salmon fishing. And water quality and economy have a nexus. It is an interconnected issue in terms of how water quality has an impact on marine habitat, including fish and shellfish. Here in Washington State, it's estimated that 200,000 jobs a year come from the shellfish and commercial fishing industries, and that contributes $14 billion of revenue to our economy. And that's just commercial operations. That does not actually include all of the tribal operations for fishing as well. And food systems, it's a really important issue to address here in our region. The Department of Ecology has reported that over 32% of Washingtonians eat salmon as a regular form of protein. So when those pollutants are in the water, they get in the fish, and then they're getting into our own bodies through our diet. And species survival is also, again, critical. Not only did I mention how important salmon are to our economy, but they're also very, very important to the orca whales. Orca whales depend on salmon for 92% of their diet. We are seeing a die-off of the southern resident whales that live here in Puget Sound, and it's very much due to both a lack of food from the die-off of salmon, but also from the legacy contaminants that are in the Puget Sound waters. So now a little bit about the 2030 district. We have 260 buildings committed to our district, 60 million square feet of commercial and multifamily office space. And our role really is to break down market barriers to building efficiency, which is why we work so closely with policymakers and local governments. We're here to make Seattle more sustainable, contribute to climate resiliency. And again, we're part of a network of 20 cities across the country that are looking at really approaching climate resiliency from an aggregate perspective. Seattle 2030 district goals include reducing energy demands in existing buildings by 50% and in new construction by 70%. And then again, where existing buildings and new construction are concerned, we're looking at reducing our stormwater impacts by 50% as well as our water consumption. And then we also look at reducing transportation impacts by 50%, and all by the year 2030, with the goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. We have a lot of support, as I said, through policymakers. Substantial support has come to our program through King County. And again, King County supports our goal of 50% stormwater reduction, but with an emphasis on green stormwater infrastructure. So our priorities for green stormwater infrastructure are part of the main strategies for stormwater mitigation. We're also starting to explore stormwater credits and mitigation at a district scale where GSI isn't feasible. So for older neighborhoods and existing buildings, we're looking at some new methods to consider how to mitigate the stormwater impacts. Then we want to mention another important partner of ours, and that's Seattle Public Utilities. Seattle Public Utilities offers a great program and tools to help property owners address their water consumption and stormwater impacts. So I would encourage you to consider reaching out to the Seattle Public Utilities Green Business Program. They offer free water assessments for your business. And if you'd like to know more, feel free to contact us at Seattle 2030 District, or as you can see at the bottom of the slide, you can contact them at greenbusiness@seattle.gov or call them at 206-343-8505. And then I want to mention a tool that we have on our website, and that is the 2030 District 2020 Annual Report. There's a lot of great ideas in there and case studies of stormwater management in urban environments, especially projects and properties that are zero lot line, where it's harder to implement GSI. We also have reports that have been funded by Boeing. Boeing is a long-term supporter of the 2030 District. You can check out our report, Harnessing the Rain. This has, again, some really important ideas around stormwater mitigation and rainwater reuse. And it also highlights our 2019 stormwater competition for design. So please check it out to get some new ideas and strategies for your properties. And then again, with the Stormwater Challenge, we are really looking at how we can help reduce not only the stormwater that's making it into our stormwater pipes, but also where it's making its way into sewer and wastewater overflow. So Seattle 2030 District is in a CSO basin, combined sewer outfall. And that means when our stormwater pipes are overtaxed due to really stronger storms that we're getting as a result of climate change, we also find that our stormwater, it's making its way into the wastewater pipes and carrying this overflow of wastewater sewage along with the stormwater into Puget Sound. I also want to mention a project we worked on with Earth Economics, and you can find this stormwater calculator on their website, as well as a link to the calculator on our website. But the idea is that you can put specific data about your building in terms of water reuse and as well as looking at water capture systems, and it will help you calculate your water footprint, your impacts, and also offer some ideas in terms of reducing your water impacts and help you save money in terms of your water consumption. So you can actually plug in the rates from your area, and that will help you calculate what you can do with these different strategies. And again, if you need any help using the calculator, feel free to contact the Seattle 2030 District, and I can walk you through this data tool. And I will say we do not report the data, we do not collect it, so it all remains anonymous. But if you would like to share your data with us, we would welcome that, because it's important for us to collect data and best understand the challenges and opportunities for commercial and housing use. And then last but not least, I want to point out a tool. It's a rating system tool that was developed with one of our partners, Salmon. And what it does is it compares different green building rating systems and where you can encourage a more rigorous use of strategies that address water quality, watershed health, water conservation, and stormwater impacts. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachael. Rachael has an amazing case study called the Watershed Building that actually used Salmon as well as a number of the other rating systems to create its benchmarks. Rachael, you're up.
All right. Thanks for having me. I am Rachael Meyer. I am Principal of Landscape Architecture at Weber Thompson, and I get to share with you this really awesome project called Watershed. It's an office building in Fremont where Weber Thompson is now located under the Aurora Bridge. And I'm excited to share all of these things that we did with Stormwater on this project. So to really kind of tell you this story, I need to go back and kind of tell you about how this all began. So in 2015, we were engaged by a developer to design a building which is just across the street from Watershed. It's called Data One. And at that time, there was a researcher named Jen McIntyre who was studying the effects of stormwater coming off of the 520 bridge on salmon. And if you haven't seen the videos that she has, Google her name. It's on YouTube, and there's a little clip of what that looks like down in the corner. She basically took the water off of the middle span of the bridge. So the key to that is there was no contaminating sources coming from off of the side of the roads. It was just in the middle of this floating bridge. So she took that stormwater and put salmon spawners into it, and within a few hours, every salmon died. They just started swimming crooked, and one by one, they all died. And then she took that same water and ran it through a column of soil and used it as filter. And when the salmon was exposed to that water, every salmon survived. And so it was this really simple and effective solution for how we can kind of reverse these negative effects. And at that time, there really wasn't an understanding of what exactly was killing the salmon, but the beauty was we had this solution. And so that's where this really started. And it's you hear about the amount of salmon in our region, and it's a hard thing to visualize. And so this is a map that we assembled that shows there's 5 different species of salmon that swim in our areas, and it shows how really all of these salmon swim underneath through the locks in Ballard and under a series of bridges till they make it to Lake Washington, and then they fan out into what I think looks very much like a series of veins or nerves. And it really has that dynamic, because if you know about the life cycle of the salmon, the adult salmon are out swimming in the ocean. They're one of the only types of fish that will go between, salt water and be in an ocean and then come into more fresh water. And so they're swimming up the stream. They swim up into these rivers and creeks where they lay their, they spawn and start the next generation of salmon. And when they do that at the top of the stream, they then perish, and their bodies then go back to provide nutrients to the watershed. And then their young are, born and then swim back out kind of that same route before they return. And so it's really kind of dynamic in and out. And, over the reality is that this journey has significantly changed in the last 100 years. The lakes and waterways have all been channelized. There's a lot of bulkheads, and ultimately, as you can see, the water in the cup on the screen, that is the liquid that's coming off of these bridges, and it has caused the fish to not make that full cycle and really die prematurely, and the populations of these salmon have been severely affected. This is another way to look at this. So you can see the underlying map is a map of Seattle in 1916. And, prior to any major development, salmon used to swim kind of by downtown and through the Duwamish Waterway, which is at the bottom of your screen, and up into Lake Washington from the south of the lake. And it was in the early 1900s that they decided to lower the level of Lake Washington by 9 feet and create the ship canal that is what we now experience with the Ballard locks that you can connect into Lake Union and then into Lake Washington. And so, in a matter of just about 30 years, the native salmon runs had to completely reorient themselves, and it became this not natural progression of salmon kind of coming through these waterways. And so that's what we were, kind of looking at when we started this. And we started with water tests, and Salmon Safe was our partner. Ellen helped us kind of set a baseline for the water quality of the water coming off the Aurora Bridge, and we found something really striking. The first 2 lines on these graphs, the green and the red, are the levels that we found on the Aurora Bridge, and the blue line center of each level is the levels that were seen by Jen McIntyre on the 520 bridge. So that was the water that was killing the salmon so quickly. So we were finding that the Aurora Bridge water had 6 times the contaminant levels from what Jen was seeing on the bridge. And, just kind of a shocking level. And at this point, we still didn't really know what was going on and what was ultimately causing it, but we knew it wasn't good. And so that brought us to this really simple idea. We basically said, if we can divert 1 downspout worth of water into the landscape of the frontage of this project, this is the Data One project, and then we send it back into the same pipe that takes it down to join back up with Lake Union, what kind of an impact can we have? And so this first phase, which was about 200,000 gallons of water, was really about process and working with agencies, and really finding the barriers that existed to be able to do this. And we found, there were barriers we didn't anticipate, such as, the downspouts on the bridge. Initially it was a question as to who owned those downspouts, and ultimately, the state owns the bridge and they own the downspouts, but it turned out the Seattle Department of Transportation maintains those downspouts. And so it just was a matter of a lot of communication. In the first year after this was built, the system actually worked so well that the water only made it to the 3rd cell. And that meant these are bathtubs, they're lined swales. And so there's no water infiltrating into the ground. And so the water just basically was completely sequestered, and therefore the toxins were completely sequestered. And it just sucked it up like a sponge. The second phase, this is the opposite side of the bridge, and this is Watershed. We were able to kind of take on a little bit more, and we were able to capture the water from 2 different downspouts. Both sides, the first and second phase, cumulatively totaled to about 600,000 gallons. And then as Watershed was being built, we were able to add scope for Turner, who was the general contractor, and Green Effects, our landscape contractor. And we built phase 3, which added another 5 downspouts of water. And that brought the total to about 2 million gallons of water. And this is what all 3 phases look like today. It's really exciting to see this all come together, and the feedback from people who are visiting these is just fabulous. It's really an improvement of these right-of-ways, but it's also this kind of teaching opportunity. So as the 3rd phase was being completed, basically 5 years after Jen's first research, she partnered with a group at the UW that actually identified the ingredient is actually a byproduct of one of the ingredients in tires that was causing the death that they were seeing in salmon. And so, we've kind of come full circle and now know what the culprit is, but that is an ingredient that's in every tire in the world. So, being able to find that solution was just really kind of the needle in the haystack that they found that they can work on. But just wanted to then share a little bit more about Watershed. This diagram kind of shows other measures that the developer was willing to take on after having completed the first phase of the swales. The project decided to pursue the Living Building Challenge, and the incentives when this building was built, it was the 3rd version of the pilot for Living Building Challenge. And, the project had to pursue at least 3 petals of the challenge. Design review was required. The building needed to achieve an EUI, energy use index, of 25% lower than a target. The project needed to reuse half of all the water that fell onto the roof, and had to use 75% less potable water than a modeled amount. And the incentives are really finally to a point where it justified these measures. So the project got a bonus of 15% more floor area ratio. We could gain up to 20 additional feet of height of the building. We ended up only using about 10 feet. And there were some additional departures that we could take advantage of. This is kind of looking at another view of kind of that same view, but just pointing your attention to the diagram on the right. So, this was one of the first projects where I had seen, the quantities of stormwater that you could collect and use, to look at what the optimum use would be. And, we hear a lot about using collected stormwater for irrigation, but really, if you're going to the efforts to collect stormwater, really it should be used to flush toilets. Our infrastructure now has us taking water from streams that are far away, cleaning it to a level that's potable, and then we use that water to flush toilets. And it just is such a waste of energy and our resource. And so we have you can see here, this is another view kind of looking from the alley side. So the shed roof takes the water down the back side. There's downspouts that then step down along the alley, and deposit the water into a 20,000 gallon cistern, which then is flushed in the building. And, you know, it's such a significant amount, 213,000 gallons of water that can be basically not used as potable water in a given year. This is what that looks like. Just kind of to share you some of the photos of the built project. You can see the downspouts that step down, and then the water cascades down this steel kind of surface, and then enters the cistern within the building. We also have these cool signs that are along the street that talk about the different ways that we're using the water. And we created these reliefs out of bronze that you can see here, that you can put a piece of paper on and do a rubbing and get a relief of that image. And it really captured kind of, you know, the name Watershed captured the identity of this building. There's also 4 beehives on the roof, and that ties into the urban agriculture requirement of the Living Building Challenge. We have plant choices along the right-of-way that support those pollinators and give them food kind of as much as the year as we can. And just wanting to close with some more kind of images of the project. And we hope you can all come to Fremont and see this really awesome project.
Welcome to our presentation on green stormwater infrastructure, opportunities, and incentives. We are going to specifically talk about the Rainwise Program, the Waterworks Grant Program, green stormwater infrastructure mini grants, and a few other resources.
So the agenda that we're going to go over in this section is starting with talking about the problem of stormwater runoff. Then we're going to look at the green stormwater infrastructure, or GSI, and some of the nature-based solutions that can help solve the problem. Then we're going to cover information about the case studies on a few programs that provide incentives for private property owners to put in GSI, including Rainwise, the Waterworks Grant Program, and a few other resources. At the end, we're going to look at some considerations when thinking about installing GSI, who you might want to involve on your team to move the project from an idea to an actual functioning installation.
So what is the problem? You've heard it articulated so nicely by Brooke, by Ellen, by Rachel. Our Seattle region just looks a whole lot different than it did a century ago. We've had years of population growth and development, and our forests and meadows and other natural systems have been replaced by rooftops, driveways, and paved surfaces that keep water from soaking into the ground. And at this point, over 60% of the land in Seattle is covered with these surfaces. The rate and volume of the water running off these hard surfaces has to go somewhere. So again, as you've heard a little earlier, it flows into stormwater pipes, and when those pipes, and then it ends up in our local waterways. So we can help a lot by putting in nature-based solutions, such as green stormwater infrastructure. So some neighborhoods, like Capitol Hill, have an even more complicated problem, and that is a combined sewer system. A combined system is when the water that falls as rain, which in non-combined areas goes straight into a stormwater pipe, actually goes into the sewer pipe. And then those pipes can get overwhelmed during our big heavy rains, and that's what causes the sewer overflows. So the goal is to stop as many of these as possible. So the solution, ta-da! Green stormwater infrastructure. Also, we're going to abbreviate it as GSI throughout this presentation. It uses plants, trees, soil, and a collection system to slow and treat rain once it hits the ground and keeps it from becoming polluted runoff. By incorporating nature into the built environment, We help our urban areas work more like the forest and natural areas that you saw earlier. Putting in GSI has so many benefits. It helps control flooding. It helps replenish groundwater. It protects habitat and living things from polluted runoff. It brings nature into urban spaces. It promotes health and well-being by providing access to green spaces, mitigates the heat island effect, and can improve air quality. And here we've got 3 different examples of highly engineered bioretention swales. So you can be a part of the solution. While large-scale green infrastructure capital projects and project in public spaces are vital, GSI projects on private property can have a huge potential to reduce stormwater by managing the rain that falls on them. Engaging everybody in this audience and the GSI community that's broader is really a priority for solving the stormwater problem. So there are numerous incentive programs and resources that have been developed over the years. And now we're going to transition to some of those programs that you may be able to consider in your future work, starting with the Rainwise program. So Rainwise at this point has actually over 2,200 installations to date, and they capture the rain that falls on over 65 acres of roof. That keeps almost 30 million gallons of rain out of the sewer system every year. And 62 of those projects are big roof projects, like places of worship, apartment buildings, and businesses. So now let's take a quick look at what is involved in the Rainwise process and how rain gardens and cisterns help solve the problem. So a rain garden is a bowl-shaped landscape feature that is full of plants and special spongy soil that allows water to soak into the ground. And a cistern, cisterns are large above-ground containers that are used to collect roof water. Rainwise cisterns are designed to capture and slowly release the water into the sewer system, or your rain garden or a bioswale. They're equipped with a low flow valve, and that is really why they work. By having this low flow valve, the water goes out very, very slowly, meaning it won't rush to the sewer pipes during the height of a storm. And then it slowly makes its way after the storm's over and there aren't any overflows. So the big, the valve is opened at the beginning of the storm season in the fall and can be closed just about now, April, and the water can be captured for non-drinking water uses. So you may wonder who is eligible for Rainwise. Well, properties that are in the combined sewer overflow basins. And you can see the map on the left with the yellow highlighted neighborhoods. Those are right now the Rainwise eligible basins in the city of Seattle. And then on the right, you may be a bit surprised. Those are all our combined sewer overflow locations. There's 124 of them in the city of Seattle. So how does a person get Rainwise? The first thing you want to do is confirm your property's eligibility. Then you want to select a Rainwise trained contractor and figure out what you're going to do. Then the contractor will do the work. And Rainwise is a program that is a team effort of Seattle Public Utilities and King County Wastewater Treatment. So it's either a county or city inspector that comes out at no charge and does a pre-inspection. If you get the thumbs up, the contractor will do the work, and then that inspector will come back, make sure everything's working really well, and then you're ready to just enjoy the benefits of your installation. For many big roofs, we have something called a vendor payment option. Some of our contractors offer a vendor payment option, meaning that you sign over paperwork saying they're responsible for getting the rebate directly. And that's what they'll do. And then also for nonprofit organizations or income limited property owners, let's say the rebate doesn't quite cover the entire amount of the installation, we have Rainwise access grants that are available to take care of that difference.
So what is a big roof project according to the Rainwise program? A building that is anything other than a single family residence can be considered a big roof. We currently have 62 of these in our portfolios. They include businesses, places of worship, community centers, public and private schools, and multifamily housing. So we're going to look at a few case studies just to give you some examples of what is possible. Located in the Green Lake neighborhood in North Seattle, Willis House is one of 400 Seattle Housing Authority sites that provides long-term low-income rental housing for Seattle residents. Willis House is specifically part of the Seattle Senior Housing of Seattle Housing Authority and comprises 42 apartments. Here you can see how they really maximize their cistern placement without impacting usable areas that the residents enjoy. The photo on the lower right is the residents enjoying lunch after celebrating the ribbon cutting with their Rainwise garden. This is a sign that the Seattle Housing Authority worked with us at King County to create for their demonstration to let the neighbors know what they were working on. Their project consists of 1 rain garden and 10 cisterns artfully disguised all along the perimeter of the building. Willis House is proud of the sustainability aspect of both stormwater control and water conservation. Our next case study is Spinney Ridge Lutheran Church, an urban progressive community of faith with a strong history and continued commitment to worship, music, social justice, and service to the Green Lake neighborhood and community. Their Rainwise project included 12 cisterns, 1 rain garden, nearly 12,000 square feet of roof area captured, and over 66,000 gallons of stormwater managed. Once the church decided that they wanted to become Rainwise, they hired a Rainwise contractor and looked at all the different parts of the roof that they could possibly capture. They completed a percolation test to see how well the soil around the building drains. That gave them information on how big their rain garden needed to be. Then this conceptual layout was drawn up with both the rain garden and cistern locations, as well as overflows for safe operations in heavy rains. Here is the rendered plan. It's hard to see, but the downspout locations are marked, as well as the cistern and rain garden locations. Here you can see the rain garden location and how various sized and shaped cisterns can be tucked unobtrusively around the property. The motto of the church team was, "Think outside the pipe." And they did. Instead of rain running off into the sewer system, it goes into a beautifully landscaped rain garden. They have cisterns all over the property, allowing for summer water use. They got a rebate of over $35,000 and had no out-of-pocket expenses. They love it and have told us for the following reasons. These are their favorites. It includes more functional space, aesthetic value, habitat value. It's creating public amenities, and it meets the regulatory requirements. So our next case study is the Alpha Omicron Pi sorority at the University of Washington. They are proud to be part of the Green Greek system at the University of Washington. And they are our first sorority or fraternity or University of Washington Rainwise project. It was run entirely by the students and alumni, and they are aiming to make the entire UW Greek community a more sustainable place. Their project included 4 cisterns, capturing 4,371 square feet of their roof and managing 17,000 gallons of stormwater. So this project was spearheaded originally by alumni of this house, and then the current student sustainability group worked with their corporate leaders who actually lived out of state. And so here's a variety of quotes. Then we were excited that both the students and the alumni and the corporate director of public relations all were in support of this project. Marissa Allison, one of the student leaders, says, "We encourage the other Greek organizations on campus and other members of the community to join in the Rainwise program to continue the process of sustainability on campus and in the Seattle area." Next slide. So this is a church that's in the Capitol Hill EcoDistrict parameters, Prospect United Church of Christ. They put in 2 cisterns, captured 3,230 square feet of roof area, and managed over nearly 13,000 gallons of stormwater. This is what the pastor, Megan Pritchard, said about why their church decided to go Rainwise. Participation in Rainwise has provided tangible evidence of our willingness to walk the talk about caring for our environment. We talk about environmental justice and climate change and are pleased to be taking this step to mitigate stormwater runoff in our community. We hope the Rainwise program will continue to be able to serve Seattle in this way for as long as it is needed. To help get the word out, the church created a welcome sign for people walking around on the sidewalk and in the neighborhood. They also invited the Rainwise program to have a table at their Seattle Night Out event several years ago. And as a result, this was pre-COVID when people were having night outs and, talking to the neighbors and walking around the neighborhood. So we met quite a few amazing neighbors at that night out at Prospect Church, including St. Joe's Church and School, who was just around the corner, also in Capitol Hill. And now they have a huge Rainwise project underway. Now we're going to talk about the Waterworks grant program.
Okay, so another funding source, which Ellen mentioned that she's done some wonderful work funded by Waterworks grant program, is the King County Wastewater Treatment Division's Waterworks grant program. Waterworks provides funding for projects that improve water quality in the service area of King County's regional wastewater system. And that area goes from South Snohomish County through most of urban King County and part of northern Pierce County. Green stormwater infrastructure projects are definitely something that are funded. So this is a fantastic funding source for larger projects. In addition to Waterworks grants, clean water funding is also available through King County Council allocated funding. So between these two funding sources, approximately $4 million is available every 2 years. Nonprofits, schools, cities, counties, tribes, special purpose districts are eligible to apply and partnerships are encouraged. The email's here and it'll be in the resource section of the presentation. And now is a perfect time to start thinking about a project because you'll be able to apply first quarter of 2023, next year. The application process is every 2 years. So start thinking about that project. And in the meantime, we're going to cover 3 case studies funded by Waterworks. 3 GSI case studies. The first one is Minimart City Park. This is a former gas station, which was transformed into a public pocket park, an arts-oriented community center in Georgetown. It's right across the street from Browing Field, and it uses a whole site design approach to GSI to benefit local water quality. It features bioretention planters, permeable paving and hardscaping, a green roof, and native drought-tolerant landscaping. This stormwater from the entire 5,300 square foot of the site is managed by GSI, and 1,000 volunteer hours were donated to make this project happen. The United Indians of All Tribes provides educational, cultural, and social services that reconnect Indigenous people in the Puget Sound region to their heritage by strengthening their sense of belonging and significance as Native people. Their La Batea Bridge Housing Youth Home provides a safe and nurturing environment for homeless youth, combining Native American wisdom and ceremony with modern health and social services. La Batea means the transformer in the Lahutchi language. Their Waterworks funded project captures the rain that falls on 6,000 square feet of roof area, and it includes a very large demonstration rain garden, 2 cisterns, and the reconnection of 3 existing cisterns. So altogether, those cisterns hold over 6,000 gallons of water for summer watering. And they won a King County Green Globe Award for Leader in Community Resiliency for this cool project. So our third case study is the Homestead Community Land Trust, who used a Waterworks grant to pilot a deep green building stormwater management standard at Willowcrest Townhomes, which is a 12-unit affordable homeownership development in Renton. As a result, 80% of the stormwater on site is diverted to a bioretention system for filtration and slow release back into the stormwater system. Landscaping is drought tolerant. Homes have features that conserve water, as well as rain barrels to capture water for landscape irrigation. And the drive access is permeable paving that captures an additional 10% of the site's stormwater. So for Properties, for those of you listening that own properties that are not eligible for Rainwise, here is a grant that's for everyone in the King County Wastewater Treatment Division service area. Green Stormwater Infrastructure mini grants offer up to $1,500 for multiple kinds of green infrastructure. They cover rain gardens and cisterns, but also other green infrastructure such as deep paving, green roofs, tree boxes, and other green infrastructure. And low-income or community-based nonprofits can receive up to $4,500. And I did notice that Aaron Clark of Stewardship Partners, who they are the folks that way back saw some of the barriers. Rainwise offered a program, but there were a lot of people who wanted to do the right thing, didn't have a means, and he submitted the first Waterworks grant for GSI mini grants, and they're so wonderful and effective and democratically available that they have received continual funding in the various grant cycles. So shown here is an example of deep paving, where a chunk of Highland Park Improvement Club's parking lot was replaced with a permeable pavement courtyard, rain garden, and lots of plants along the sidewalk. So there'll be information on GSI infrastructure and other resources later. So here's a case study, GSI mini grants, Equinox Studios and Ecos. This demonstration project is so cool. It basically is industrial strength green stormwater solutions, and it's happening in Georgetown. Equinox Studios partnered with Ecos, the nonprofit organization, and what used to be Lake Fifth Avenue in a rainstorm is now very much more controlled because they installed quite a number of GSI solutions. The overall project includes a rain garden, oyster barrels that filter out heavy metals, a living wall, and a permeable pavement, asphalt, and concrete demonstration site. Pictured here is a Gradix box. It's also called a rain garden in a box. Gradix boxes can be great for urban property where space is scarce. Rain from the roof is cleaned and filtered by running through layers of plants, soil, sand, and rock, and then out through an under drain. Gradix boxes can be funded by the mini grant program. And then this next slide is actually another Gradix box. This is the low-cost version in a plastic tote, and it's being planted up by staff from Ecos and the contractor Dynamic Waters. On the right is the living wall when it first went up. And if you go and take this self-guided tour now, it is covered with vibrant vines. And in fact, the clematis is in full bloom. And then here is the absolutely brilliant solution of oyster barrels being put together from start to finish. The oyster shells are great at filtering out zinc and other contaminants, and they end up getting replaced about once a year once they've picked up all the contaminants that they can handle. So I mentioned the self-guided tour. This is a giant sign that is at Equinox Studios, and there's a QR code so people can find out more, but you can do the self-guided tour and see all these great options. The other thing I want to mention about Equinox Studio is we're talking about resources and incentive here through the programs we work on. This is a project that shows that there are quite a lot of funders out there very concerned about stormwater pollution. And this project got quite a lot of money from, or in-kind resources from the Port of Seattle, from Boeing, the King County Flood Control District, and others. So being creative about finding funding partners is a key to making some really cool things happen.
So while today we've covered a few resources for the Seattle and King County area, we encourage you to check out the 12,000raingardens.org website to find other incentive programs in the Puget Sound area. And if you do go forward with putting in a Rainwise project, after your project is installed, when you have a fully functioning, well-maintained stormwater system on your site, you may be eligible to save money on your annual drainage fee. Seattle Public Utilities developed the Stormwater Facility Credit Program to recognize privately owned systems that reduce stormwater flow and or provide water quality treatment, which help lessen the impact to the city's stormwater system, creeks, lakes, and or Puget Sound. So some considerations and good questions that we get from our partners over the years that we just wanted to name here that you might want to be thinking about in advance of moving forward with your project. It's pretty common for these big roof properties to have challenges around space, needing to secure the maximum square footage of parking lots, playgrounds, just really not being able to part ways with any space. So there are all kinds of creative solutions for having the cisterns tucked and hidden, but space challenges are common. Another one that we hear a lot is places wanting to really solve existing drainage problems. So that could look like your basement is flooding, the lawn is pooling, there's water in certain parts of the parking lot, just things that are causing trouble. And so working with your contractor to see if it's possible for your installation to solve some of that issue. There's also commonly gardening and landscaping needs, whether it's maintaining the current plantings and having watering needs or beautifying the space. A rain garden can be a way to get that need met. There's lots of questions about cost. Can the rebate cover the entire project? Are there long-term savings possibles? Is the contractor able to front the expenses while you wait for the rebate? So all those things we've been trying to answer here. And if you have more questions, we're happy to go into them. Another key consideration is the team that is going to both make this decision and design it and maintain it. So every big roof project has its own unique needs. And given that every address has their own decision-making bodies and processes, we have found over the years an effective way to move these projects forward is to involve many of the stakeholders from the beginning. So inviting your community of decision makers, whoever that is, to the educational presentations, the contractor decision-making, pre-inspections, community celebrations can all be helpful ways to be inclusive and to grow engagement throughout the process. We have found that having buy-in from all parties involved really ensures ownership and care of the final project. And we have seen big roof projects prioritize including property owners, maintenance staff, educators, tenants, facility staff, gardeners, board members, PTAs, green teams, and more. Being mindful of who has decision-making power and what is efficient to move things forward while including as many of the people involved in your organization or building or community as are interested has been really useful at other sites. So we just wanted to thank you all for joining us, and we hope that you will join the many people and properties making big impacts around our region with green stormwater infrastructure. Thank you for joining us on this presentation. Let us know if we can be of assistance. And our last slide is more tools and resources.
So I will make sure that that last slide comes out in an email to follow up just with any additional questions. We are going to have a Q&A period, but I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to actually check their site eligibility. So if you have any specific questions about what you are and are not eligible for, you can ask the Rainwise team while they're here. So for anybody who's interested, the link is now in the chat, and I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. Or if there are any lingering questions from the presentation itself.
I just want to say thanks to everyone that's here. I see a lot of really loyal 20-30 followers and some great great leaders in sustainability and the stormwater movement. So thanks to all of you. And just want to thank our speakers again, and apologize to Rachael for the challenges we had. At some point, we will feature the Watershed project on the 2030 district website or in another stormwater session, so you can get to know that project better, because it really is a groundbreaking project. And I want to plant a seed, just something for folks to think about as you start to get your questions together, is a couple things that came up at the tail end with the Rainwise folks, and one of which is what a beautiful attribute a rain garden can be. And so something to think about if you're constructing a new project, and we have seen this work successfully on projects that have some larger scale sites. But you can build your rain gardens that you might have as landscape features in advance during this construction period. And it really helps save the project some funding on dewatering. But also it is a beautiful, rich, lush, completed amenity by the time folks come on site and occupy the project. And that's a unique situation where oftentimes the building is just fabulous at the beginning, but you're waiting for landscape to mature. But if you build these rain gardens early on in your project, they're going to be complete, and you're going to have a great landscape amenity when the projects open up. So just some food for thought there. And then the other thing that has been rolling around in my mind, and this is something that I've talked about with Erin Clark, who's in the audience and can help answer questions for stewardship partners. But the idea of the Gradix box for me opens up some potential for inclusion, because rain gardens are not something that is necessarily accessible for folks who are limited to wheelchairs. But based on the scale of your Gradix box, you could potentially have a wheelchair accessible rain garden. So if you're working on affordable housing projects or mixed use housing or planned communities, I would encourage you to consider Gradix boxes for folks with special needs as well. So just a couple things that I've been thinking about from a stormwater perspective. And then I just want to let Brooke facilitate some Q&A if there's some questions in the chat.
Thank you, Ellen. I do have one in the chat. How is maintenance and upkeep of existing GSI projects being accounted for and planned for? Without thoughtful planning, existence and future projects may only function for a year or even less. The Rainwise team have anything for us? I can also pop it in your chat too.
I was wondering if Rachel was going to talk about that, because it's really fascinating. Just to start at the big project level, King County Wastewater Treatment Division put in some absolutely stunning, highly engineered roadside rain gardens. Seattle Public Utility has put those sorts of things in all over the city. It was the Barton neighborhood in West Seattle where we put ours in. And we decided we wanted a higher standard of maintenance. And it's expensive to have a higher standard of maintenance, to have a bigger palette of plants that might require a little bit more. And then the other interesting challenge is that some traditionally trained landscape contractors, there was actually one of the bioswales where literally you could see the big machine that came in and just cut the Kelsey dogwood down to little nubs, and it did survive, but it was just sort of a bring in and cut everything down, as opposed to no, these are things with roots that are going to evapotranspirate all winter long. And so the challenge of maintenance is expensive, and it does need to be very well thought out and well planned for. It provides an opportunity for some workforce development. And I think of when I first started this program, Sightline did a series of stormwater cohorts. And I remember someone from Washington, DC saying, our big gray, highly engineered capital projects and our green projects really cost the same. But the green projects provide a living wage for someone throughout the life of the project. So the money was actually going into paying for that sort of thing. The other thing in thinking about maintenance, we want GSI to be aesthetically pleasing so that the general community that might think it's messy looking or not neat and tidy enough, even if it does look bad, if the soils are working and if rain is going down, sometimes they're functioning, even if they aren't aesthetically looking their best. Then to talk about cisterns and Gradix boxes and oyster shells, everything has its lifetime of maintenance. The cisterns absolutely have to be looked at before the storm season to make sure that low flow valve works, to make sure all the gutters and pipes inputting into the cistern are clean, so you're not going to get a clog. The oyster shells, the oysters do need to be replaced every year. So knowing what the maintenance needs are and planning for it, and having the budget and the resources for maintenance is essential. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that could add a whole lot more insightful thoughts.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, for the urban projects that we've been involved with, their maintenance has been one of the agreements that needed to be negotiated between Seattle Public Utilities and these landowners, because Seattle Public Utilities really doesn't have the budgets to maintain everything that goes in, but most private developers want to be able to maintain their frontage, project frontage, just to, you know, the standard that is expected of them anyway. And so I don't think it's necessarily a higher cost for maintenance for, say, the swales here at Watershed. I think it's very similar to the frontage improvements that are in front of most buildings. But with these projects that are taking on such large flows, we are seeing more sediment than we anticipated. And so SPU has been working with us to figure out how to put in catch basins that SPU can then maintain and vacuum the sediment out on a regular schedule, rather than having a landscape crew need to try and do that. So we're just sort of adding a few more pieces to the infrastructure, but it shouldn't be prohibitive.
That's a great point, Rachel. So I think what I would add is that our policymakers are starting to look more and more at incentives for green stormwater infrastructure that's going to include, it's going to include reduced utility costs. And so with that, you can assume that you could put those reduced utility costs into your project. And I think it's like anything else. What we've learned in our region, one of the reasons why we have such exponential stormwater problems is that we didn't think about the site in the same ways that we thought about the building. And so really what we're looking at is a movement towards a higher integration of site making decisions as we make our building decisions when we're creating new projects. And so again, as you look at what the overall maintenance cost might be of a project, it's now time to consider the sites as well, because without those considerations, we're really neglecting what integrated performance looks like. It's one of the many reasons that Seattle 2030 district has a stormwater program, is really to be holistic about our decisions about design and development, so that we can solve the problems that were created when we paved over paradise, so to speak. So, you know, I think that GSI is really coming into its own, and we're going to see a lot of governments looking at it differently. City of Seattle has the Rain City Partnership coming up that has some high priorities for maintenance funding. Waterworks has maintenance funding in their grants. And actually, we're going to likely see coming from the city of Bellevue a potential stormwater utility incentive for GSI. So, you know, I think all of this is an evolution as GSI becomes more common practice. And frankly, we want all of you to weigh in with the 2030 district to help us inform our policymakers so those incentives exist as well. So it's an ongoing dialogue, and we welcome all of you to keep participating in that with us.
I would also say that one of the other places, you went so macro and holistic. That was beautiful, Ellen. But if we go back down to small and just plant choice, the soils that you need to have the highly percolating, great drainage are just magnificent. And so it is sometimes astounding how quickly plants grow. You know, you have that first year they creep, next year they are, you know, sort of hang out, and then the third year they leap. Well, it seems like sometimes in rain gardens, plants leap after year 2. So in the beginning, I think designers were using a lot of red osier dogwood, and then you'd end up with a rain garden with this giant plants. So there's definitely some resources in that tools and resources page for plant materials that are really good for sun, for shade, and really considering when it comes to maintenance, you know, are things going to grow so huge that you're going to have to replace them? Or, yeah, so it's just another consideration, and there's tons of resources for that as well.
That's all I have for questions. Does anyone have anything last minute they want to pop in there?
You know, I just want to add for folks that are working on commercial projects, the Urban Land Institute has been doing research for years around GSI and has some studies that would demonstrate that GSI improves property values. So I will try to track that down, and in our follow-up email to all of our participants, I'll include that article. But again, something to think about is GSI really is as important as many of the decisions you might make around a building, and we can look forward to our properties appreciating if we install it.
Well, thank you everyone for spending the afternoon with us. I really appreciate everyone for being here. Be looking for an email from our team for some follow-up links and information and polls. Thank you so much, everyone.
I'm going to stop recording.